All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to MVP's final briefing of 2025. I am Zoe Toby. I'm MVP's Director of Communications, and I'm going to open us up before turning it over to our ED, Billy Wimsat, to facilitate this great fireside chat. So, just a few words I want to say in welcoming everyone. Um, First, introduce yourself in the chat. Introduce yourself, share your name, where you're calling from, and something that's giving you hope at the end of 2025 here as we look ahead to what's next. So, a few words of housekeeping. You can still invite others to join us. We'll put the link in the chat. Just go to movement.vote/briefing and send folks the link. Yes, we're going to send the recording and slides out in the next 1 or 2 days, so no need to take notes verbatim. If you have questions, you can use Zoom Q&A feature, and we'll put instructions in the chat for that. We're going to pause the chat during most of the time that speakers are talking, just to keep everyone focused and not distracted. And if you want to join us for optional office hours afterward, come on down. So, yeah, just want to say thank you so much to everyone for being here, all of your support of MVP, to donors. Just thank you so much for fueling this work over this past year. Volunteers, thank you for helping spread this work, making it a movement of donors backing this work. And for all the newcomers, welcome, welcome to MVP. I'll share just a little about what the heck MVP is. The easiest way to think of it, I think, is we're like a mutual fund for political giving. So we raise the money from the donors all over the country, and then we do the vetting, the researching, and we channel it back out to all the best local organizing and movement building groups doing the most effective work in the most pivotal places everywhere. So that's MVP in a nutshell. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Billy Wimsat, our executive director and founder. Billy, take it away.
Thank you, Zoe. Hi, everyone. I'm going to be super quick because I'm so excited to get into this fireside chat. And I just want to start with a little context. Obviously, we're living under a terrible regime. Parents are literally being ripped away from their children while they are walking to school. And at the same time, there really and truly is hope. Trump is sinking in the polls. Neighbors are organizing to protect neighbors. We're overperforming and kicking their ass in every election. We just had two of the biggest protests in US history. Shout out to No Kings. And there's a nascent sense of hope that we can not only bring this nightmare to an end, but if we play our cards right, we can get to a brighter future in the next 3 years. We can do it. Are you feeling that? Make some noise wherever you are. How many of you have read the comeback memo? You can find it on the front page of the website, movement.vote. Basically, we have to operate at three different levels for short, medium, and long term. In the short term, in 2026, we have the chance to create a blue wave if we work for it. Our number one job for the next 11 months is to do everything we can to win every close race we can to disrupt this MAGA authoritarian trifecta. We have to flip the House. We have to try to flip the Senate, which also impacts the courts. We have to win as many state trifectas as we can to protect the vote in 2028. We have to invest big and early and fight hard in every single race. It's not going to be easy, but the job is clear. We know what we have to do in 2026. However, to win over the longer term in 2028 and beyond, something qualitatively different is required of us. We're going to need to build a broader and inspiring yes coalition as well as a no coalition. We're going to need to have to make our movement and leadership better. It's a much harder and not cookie cutter thing we have to do. How is MVP tackling this? You can think of MVP's approach as a three-layer cake. The first layer is supporting local organizing in all the battleground states and districts we need to win. That's what MVP is known for. That's what the vast majority of our funding goes to. But over the past year, you heard it here first, we've begun to build out two additional layers, call it MVP 2.0. A second layer for media innovation and collaboration, and a third, more experimental layer to work with allies to tackle really big adaptive problems like how do we improve the culture of the left? How do we improve the Democratic Party? How do we support a stronger youth movement to compete with PragerU and Turning Point? What about algorithms and AI? So, in short, we're swinging for the fences in the short term to win everything we can win in 2026. And we're simultaneously investing in longer term innovation and collaboration to create really big adaptive change that we know is needed. Which is a great segue. We're honored to welcome three of the most brilliant visionary strategists and leaders of our time. Ai-jen Poo, Latasha Brown, Doran Schruns. They're three of the people who I personally learned the most from, and I'm so excited to hear their latest thoughts today. It's worth saying, unsurprisingly, all three come from local organizing. Ai-jen Poo got her start organizing domestic workers in New York and went on to build National Domestic Workers Alliance and Care in Action, which have created this brilliant new framework for care, from childcare to elder care to healthcare, which you might have heard about in the Build Back Better bill. Aijen's a really big deal. She's a Time 100 Person of the Year, MacArthur Genius, et cetera, et cetera. But behind the scenes, she's one of the most amazing movement builders we have, in addition to what she does publicly. Latasha Brown started out organizing at Selma High School at age 28 as a young Black woman. Imagine this. She ran statewide for school board in Alabama and came just 800 votes shy of winning statewide in Alabama. The rest is history. She went on to build Black Voters Matter, which is one of the most important new groups in American political life. Rosa Parks' church recently did their 70th anniversary of the Montgomery bus boycott. They had a giant photo of two people, Rosa Parks and Latasha Brown. Like Aijen, Latasha is an incredible organizer behind the scenes as well as in front of the camera. Doran Schranz, finally, spent 15 years running Faith in Minnesota and helping architect the Minnesota Miracle. If you haven't seen the Minnesota Miracle video on our website, you have to watch it. This 13-minute version is the best explanation of what success looks like at the state level and what is MVP really trying to do all across the country. So 2 years ago, Doran successfully passed the torch to another extraordinary leader, Reverend Janae Bates. And since then, Doran has been barnstorming the country, mentoring hundreds of leaders, including me, to learn from the Minnesota model, including MVP and a ton of our partners. It's so great. And again, no accident that all three of these extraordinary leaders come from local organizing. It's so wonderful to have the three of you here with us today. And we're going to dive right in. Aijen, will you get us started and just set some context? You came up with this really fascinating formulation right after Trump was elected around three Earths. Can you give us a quick hit on your analysis and the path forward?
Yes. Well, first, I want to say thank you to you, Billy, for your leadership in good times and in really, really unprecedented hard times. You have been such an incredible support and partner to local organizers and people who are really serious about building power in this country. And man, we're so grateful for you. And thank you for putting me together with two of the organizers that I respect the most in this country. It's going to be a great time. Yeah, to quickly share a little bit about this framework, it was really about helping myself and my teams figure out how to navigate this very complex, chaotic time and figure out how to do strategy, grounded in the reality that we're actually operating in multiple dimensions of reality at the same time in this country right now. And the three dimensions that I wanted to name explicitly, we call them the three Earths, right? The first dimension, the first reality, is what we call Earth One. And that is the paradigm that we have always known and grown up in, a paradigm of a functioning liberal democracy where, however imperfect and biased our systems may be, there are a set of tools that we have learned over time and that we know how to deploy to improve those systems, to make them work better for more people. And we kind of operated with this assumption that the arc of history bends towards justice, and our work is to accelerate the bend, deepen the bend, right? So it's the world, the paradigm of a functioning liberal democracy in America. And that paradigm, that Earth One, still exists in some places, at some moments. And where it does exist, it is actually quite important that we breathe life into it and we engage. Like state legislatures will meet, people will be governing, activity will be happening, budgets will get decided with real impact in people's lives. Like we do have to continue to engage. And we have to understand that we're also living in the second dimension of reality, the second paradigm, which is new at the national level, which most of us have never experienced before. And that is a paradigm where civil society is under attack by our government, where due process, rule of law, basic assumptions, like things that we didn't actually have to know the definitions for because we could just take them for granted, right? The fact that right now we are living in a reality where the very work of fighting for justice and fairness is being framed as un-American, where childcare workers are being kidnapped in front of the kids in their care at work, disappeared with no due process. People are being sent to countries they've never known with no due process. That is happening every day in our country right now. That is Earth 2. And if we don't figure out how to mount enough of a challenge to the forces that are in power at this moment, we could be stuck in this reality for a generation. And the consolidation of this reality and the normalizing of it is something that we cannot accept. Every day, there's a set of choices before us about what we do, normalize, and accept. We not only have to figure out how to survive this moment, we have to figure out how to mount a powerful challenge out of Earth 2 and then towards Earth 3, which is the third paradigm I want to specifically name. Because Earth 3 is the paradigm after this current reality that we're in. And it is a future where there's so much at stake, it almost feels existential on every level you can imagine. Like, will there be cities designed for climate resilience, or will we be in a Hunger Games for water? Will AI completely gut the middle class, or could it be trained to help us solve problems and work alongside us? Will there even be a safety net at the federal level, or could we have universal care, right? Like there is a Earth 3 that is far beyond our imagination. And there's also a huge amount at stake because it could also go some whole other way. And the reality is we're not going back to Earth 1, right? We're not going back to the world, the time before we found ourselves in this new paradigm. And the work of seeding the Earth 3 that we want with more fairness, with a strong, vibrant democracy, with universal care, that future has to be seeded now. So in some ways, what we have to figure out is how do we have strategy in multiple dimensions of reality at the same time to get out of Earth 2, to seed the future we want in Earth 3, and to draw from the best of what we know how to do in Earth 1.
Mm. That is such a powerful grounding framework that once I heard that, I was like, I've been thinking in three Earths ever since. So let's bring in Latasha to talk about something very immediate. You just finished running this brilliant pop-up campaign to get people not to shop at Trump supporting companies over the holidays, and you pulled it off in less than a month after we had no Kings 2, and then we had the election, and then there was nothing planned. So you decided to plan something. Tell us where this brilliant idea came from and how it played out.
So one, like my sister Ajin said, Billy, this is all your fault. I just want you to know that all this amazing organizing work, you are one of the architects of that. And You have been extremely instrumental in Black Voters Matter. And the founding of Black Voters Matter being supportive. Our first grant came from, I've just got to do a shout out. One of our first grants came from Billy when we were doing the Alabama race. We were able to do it because of the Movement Voter Project. So I just want to lift that up and say how important and critical Movement Voter Project, which is why I'm rocking my t-shirt today. But anyway, I will say, and even the pop-up campaign, part of it, it was an idea, it was a thought that I had. And one of my other earlier conversations was with Ajin, with Billy. And, Billy, if you ever want a cheerleader on your side, Billy is like, we can do it. And so I'm lifting that up because I do think it matters how we move forward. It matters how we support people moving forward. So one, I'm lifting Billy up because I love him, but I also think that the way that the Movement Voter Project has operated and functioned is part of the reason why these other actions are taking place. And so I don't want that to be overlooked, right? Because sometimes we're not really conscious of that. And when people are fighting, the one thing they need is to feel supported. And oftentimes in our movement, what we do is the opposite. And oftentimes in our movements, what we do is we shift to what is winnable and not necessarily do the work that's required to base build. And so this effort that we did was called We Ain't Buying It campaign. That campaign, the origins of all of that was an idea I had. We pulled people together. Like I really kind of talk about what was the thinking around it. Part of the thinking around the We Ain't Buying campaign was three kind of core beliefs. That one, we wanted people to reclaim their power. In essence, we really wanted folks to be socialized and socialized around. We've got to get people in the space of feeling discomfort. Like what we want is we want people to live their regular lives and not thinking about politics. And all of a sudden we want them to come and let's just do a mass boycott forever. Like that's not how people who are not in movement works. So part of what we have to do is create these spaces, these on-ramps for people to become a part of movements. I think that's what we saw with No Hands. And then, Hands Off, the Hands Off movement gave birth to No Kings. It laid the foundation for that. And so for our movement, our action, what we were doing with this pop-up campaign, and I'm saying this because I want to push back on sometimes and particularly in the progressive space, it's around, well, how did it hurt? How did it hurt this company or this company? This wasn't about those companies. This was really about us. This was about how do we organize people to actually get to the space that as we're seeing authoritarianism, as we're seeing it ascend, it is going to require people to move outside of their comfort zone. And the way you do that is you create these opportunities for people to do such. And you've got to make the movement irresistible. You've got to make the movement fun. You've got to make the movement something that they see and feel themselves a part of. And so what we were able to do with the We Ain't Buying campaign, and we really had 3 weeks, it was really 2 weeks, we were doing full organizing around that. We were able to get 228 organizations to be a part. And that's not a small feat. That's a large feat in terms of the number of organizations and the kind of organizations. You had large labor groups like AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, SEIU have millions of members. You had community organizations that were doing grassroots organizing. You had groups like the National Council of Negro Women who have never supported a boycott, right? Never, because that went to their board and they felt so moved with it. You had a group of older women out in Seattle that were a garden club that said, we want to be down. The reason why I'm saying it is so important, that is so important, is that oftentimes we become ideologues in our movements and we want everybody to be in our movement, be focused and not create these opportunities where the movement is porous enough to actually pull people in. What we were able to see in this campaign, this pop-up campaign, is that there were over 40 million engagements in a matter of a week, that there were 40 million engagements all across, in terms of even in media coverage, we had over 2,200, I think it's a little more than that, but for sake of what I can remember right now, over 2,200 media mentions, articles. All of those things are important, not because it was like, oh, this is what we're doing, but what it does is it penetrates the narrative of what people can do and what's possible. So we spend a lot of times on our work around what's the metrics? Show me the metrics. When you're losing folks, because what we're doing is we've made it so professionalized that folks don't see themselves having a place in our movement, that they don't find themselves having an on-ramp. And unless we create, we're going to have mass participation. And so what we were able to do in a short period of time is really be able to give people a space. I think it was three things, three quick highlights. One, it was a reclaim their power. I told you kind of the numbers. It was everywhere. And people took ownership of it. Folks were taking the logos as we want them to and making them their own organizational colors, because it wasn't about one organization. We didn't even lead with one organization. It just became all of ours. So there's something around people taking ownership. In addition to that, people created their own actions. There were protest actions happening all over the country. They were singing Christmas carols in front of Home Depot. People were standing out in signs in zero weather. I don't know how they did that because I'm from the South, but nevertheless, that's commitment. People were doing signs on overpasses. There were gatherings that took place. There were people that were going out canvassing. My point is that people saw and took ownership and saw this as something that they could do. That's something that they created. And oftentimes that feels like a soft science, and we underestimate what requires to base build, to massage before you can plant. If you're a farmer, before you can plant some seeds, you got to till the soil. You got to make the soil soft. You got to fertilize the soil. You got to water and take care of the soil. And so part of what we saw in this space is this was a warning shot. This was a way for us to send a warning shot of what could happen when we're collectively working together. What we do know is that in this process, that on Black Friday alone, we knew that foot traffic, the numbers are all over the place, but we've got some data. We're waiting for the data to come out. But the truth of the matter is, according even to all accounts that we've seen, less items were sold. People were spending money online, but the number is really based on the tariffs and the increase in what things cost. That there was a 7 to 8% increase because of inflation of what things cost. So the numbers are being played with in such a way for people not to believe. That's why we have to take ownership and raise that. The last and the final thing that I'll say kind of related to that is that there was reclaim, there was redirect. We wanted to make sure that we were redirecting folks to think about local businesses, community-owned business, women and minority-owned businesses. Why? For me, I'm always an organizer. So that wasn't just about, yes, we want people to spend money because those are folks in our communities that are struggling, but it's also an organizing vehicle. When you're organizing and you're organizing the ecosystem in your community, you're relationship building. When you relationship build, those are the companies that when ICE comes, they say, you can't come in our business because this is my community. Those are the businesses that when people need help and support. So part of that is we're rebuilding community, because in many ways, we've gotten away from that. We've become very individualist. And so part of it is building community. And the last and the final thing that I'll say, and two examples I'll just highlight on that. Little Blue Cart, who was one of the companies that we mentioned, they reached out, told us that they had a 400% increase in online sales. That's significant for them. There's another one called BLAP, which is an app that locates geo-tracking and locates Black business. They said that they had a significant increase in downloads of their app. So it was working. So much so that we've got all these businesses that have been reaching out to us. We're like, no, we're not a promoter. And then the last and the final thing is around resistance. It was reclaiming, redirect our resources, and resistance, that we have to get people. Convenience is the enemy of change. And so part of the way that we shop in this country and we spend money in this country is rooted in convenience. We all go on Amazon. Those of us who go on Amazon online is because it's convenient. They've made it comfortable and convenient. Unless we disrupt that and give some reason to disrupt that, we will continue to be at the mercy of those who don't want change. So I'll stop there.
Yes, and you're just getting started with this really new idea. I want to bring Doran in. Doran, you have been barnstorming the country and mentoring and coaching organizers. Everyone wants to learn from the Minnesota model. What are you observing about how organizations are adapting this moment? How are you working with groups to level up their work?
So first of all, just because it's like a tradition here, I want to also thank Billy and MVP and talk about the role that MVP plays for local organizing organizations is an extraordinary role, and I have a direct experience of that. Without MVP putting cards in the hands of local organizations to wield their own power to do their own politics, there would not have been the path to 2023 in Minnesota. So it is, I've said this in other settings with the MVP crew here, but I can't underscore it enough. And as we're building the bridge into 2026, that is like, there's a bunch of strategic choices that are going to be on the table for MVP, both in terms of how you're relating to your partners on the ground and what expectations and context you're creating for how organizations are being invited to engage with politics in Earth 2. So I say that because I'm going to talk a little bit about like state-based organizing to answer, to follow the rules and answer Billy's questions, but I like a step back for a second and just give a little context around this question about the midterms. Because I think there's very much going to be this Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3 dynamic in terms of how funding moves for the midterms, how politics and political programs are being incentivized and driven, and then what pressures and counter pressures are put on some of our most important state partners for how they operate in the strategic conditions that they're actually in 2026. And then how that can scaffold and add up to the kind of national campaigns that iGen and Latasha are talking about right now. So I, just to make sure that I keep it short, I'm extremely influenced by iGen's analysis, kind of big picture analysis. And I also want to hat tip Latasha Brown, because I think that, in short, the way we need to think about the midterms, very, very big picture, is yes, hopefully blue wave or whatever. But I think it's important to watch Stephen Miller's playbook for politics. He has an electoral playbook. And it was outlined by Greg Sargent in the Washington Post recently. And I recently heard Latasha reframe some of that in a meeting that I was in with her, where we have to understand that the centerpiece of that playbook is not a polite contest for swing voters in X number of battleground districts. The playbook is building a spectacle of cruelty rooted in anti-Blackness and anti-immigrant, sort of, it's not even that behind the scenes, to create spectacles of cruelty that they presume will be persuasive. So as we are doing door knocking in battleground districts, they will invade Chicago. As we might be doing polls to find out, like, what is the right word to say to a soccer mom someplace, they are going to kidnap childcare workers. As people are setting up their campaigns, I just want to talk specifically about governors, state legislators, just right now in Minnesota. Well, Governor Walz is setting up the campaign to run for governor. They are using Somali immigrants as a scapegoat to send in ICE to stir the pot. And I don't think we should think about that as separate from political. It's the center of their politics. So the question becomes, how do we stage our politics in those strategic conditions? And how do we understand that hundreds of Muslim and Christian and multiracial solidarity, embodying multiracial solidarity in 26 events around the states, which Isaiah and Unidos and faith-based organizations organized in the past week, is maybe the most important political work that could be done in the next 6 months. Like, Like, that's not like a side dish to politics. It might be the main dish, like when we go into 2026. Or the work that Latasha just described about tilling the soil, where people are finding their on-ramp to resistance and to sort of embodying what it looks like, including really centering that embodiment being multiracial solidarity for the Earth 3. We've been trying to get to for like 250 years, okay? 300, 400 years. Like that itself is, and how we strategically construct that. Like, I'm not talking about being stupid. I'm talking about strategically constructing that so it becomes a political movement in 2026 and stacks into a national story. I think the conversations that I'm having on the ground in states with organizing organizations is how to think about their organizing in that context and their political work in that context. Because the opportunity of 2026 is rich. Like, there's lots of bad shit, but there is also rich opportunity. My biggest fear is that we could miss it because we're so in Earth 1 and so used to doing things in certain ways, particularly in electoral politics, that we don't actually figure out how are we laying the foundation for the yes vision for Earth 3, and how are we doing our strategy in the face of the actual authoritarian playbook that we're up against, so that we have a counter strategy to that reality. Because I think we're seeing it all over the country, what that counter strategy actually looks like. We're seeing it. Like, it's happening in North Carolina in response. I mean, just in the 2-3 organizations that I've been working with, 17,000 people have been in in-person trainings. Like, it is extraordinary what's going to unfold. But we, as strategists and thinkers, have to truly understand that the politics of the midterms, the front of the battle, is going to be a battle for which coalition is "quote unquote" legitimate. And they're going to do the spectacles of cruelty to delegitimize all of us and try to legitimize themselves to have a fraud fight all the way through March of next year. And have we built the resilience and the power and the base and the support and the political strategy, the hard political strategy, that allows us to legitimize the multiracial America that is going to drive the yes agenda into Earth 3?
Yeah. Ooh. Okay. This is a great, Natasha, let's bring you back in, because you've been living under authoritarianism your whole life,
Right.
and organizing under authoritarianism.
Literally.
And with the Voting Rights Act, potentially on the chopping block with the Supreme Court to potentially regerrymander the entire South. How are you thinking about the new wave of threats to voting rights? Yeah.
So let me something Doran said that was brilliant that I I don't want us to step over. Part of funding in the South has been difficult because it did not meet the same kind of organizing that was national, right? Because people had a failure to understand what we were up against. And I'm not saying this, I'm saying it as a learning lesson, because there were always 3 components. It was always where, particularly around voter suppression, it was always, you do 3 things. You use a legal process in such a way to validate. You basically take what it is that you want to do to take, and you validate it through a legal process that seems legitimate, right? Because let's be honest, slavery was legal in this country. Segregation was legal. So the thing being legal in itself does not mean it's right, nor does it mean that because it's legal, it in itself is going to free you, right? That in many instances, even those of us that were organizing in the South, we need to have the Republican or the Democratic Party. The truth of the matter is, the majority of our fight was with the Democratic Party up until the last 12 years, and it's still a fight with the Democratic Party, but that's a whole nother story, another call. The second thing, though, I want to say kind of related to that in this moment, I think is a lesson, is that what Black people in the South were able to do is we were able to take that fear and turn it into fuel. And so part of what happens is that the entire context now that is happening is really to create fear, is to make people be so fearful they're paralyzed. And there's some folks that are what you would see in the South, you would see was this courageousness. We would die if we would just respond to that fear in that way. We would have to take the fear, use as a vehicle to organize around, to actually create around possibilities of what could be. And so oftentimes what I find is, particularly in the party, and I'm going to say this in the least offensive way that I can say it, right, is that oftentimes when fear strikes, the solution is go white and right. Like we're going to go further to the right and we're going to go further white. Right. And so in that, what you are doing in that process is you are cutting off your nose in spite of your face. That is essentially what is happening. That is the moment that's when you're in a basketball game and you got six minutes left on the court. That's when you go hard in the paint. And so instead of pulling back, it's really important. So I say that to say, because I think there's some learning lessons with the voting work that we're doing right now. We're seeing these attacks on voting rights. We're seeing the Louisiana versus Calais case. The bottom line is, if you are putting all of your faith in the metrics of what the law should be and what they can't do, and we're going to take it to the court, that has not been our experience. Like that has just not been our experience. We have had to be creative, innovative, and in many ways we were punished because we were organizing a different way around that. That is what's going to be required of us now. We're going to have to build coalitions, that we are going to have to fund our work and our institutions in a way that we take the fear, and the way you replace the fear is that you give people possibilities, right, that go beyond just protection. They have to be possibilities of what's possible, of something greater than themselves. The second thing is, this is an opportunity for us to actually not move from progressive. This last November election should be instructive to us, that Trump and the administration might not want DEI, but clearly America wants it. We saw more women, we saw more people of color, we saw younger people being elected. So we don't need to go back to our muscle memory to think that we've got to go white and right, instead of really understanding that in this country right now, what is going to be required for us to have the boldest and the broadest coalition is that we're going to have to really be able to speak to those communities that collectively that we can win together. The third and the final thing that I'll say that I think is important, particularly as we're thinking about they're going to try to steal this election. Not that they're going to try to, they're already doing it, right? They're already creating, I remember when we were talking about the voter suppression and folks thought we were exaggerating, like just organize more people, right? We're going to see some of the same tactics that are happening on the state level. They're saying on the federal level. We're going to have a narrative strategy that we're preparing people that they're going to steal the election, as well as we're going to have to move. We cannot just depend on how many folks do we round up to get to the polls to vote, because even if we do that, which we should, it should be overwhelming, that we're going to have to get in front of the narrative now. It wasn't by accident that Trump was talking about the steal way before the election took place. He started planning the narrative. And why that's important, Erica Chenoweth, who all of us work with, in her report that she studies authoritarianism around the world, and the two things that it raises of where people that you can topple or disrupts the rise of authoritarianism is, one, some kind of big sensational event that happens, someone's killed, is a tipping point event that happens, or the elections. There's another vehicle that when people feel like their elections are stolen from them, then that in itself creates the kind of movement and the energy. And we can go back and go to Brazil. I can go across in terms of modern pieces. What that means is this year, we've got to be investing early in elections to get people emotionally engaged. And part of what happens, what frustrates me in the voting space, is that we've reduced people to numbers like they're jelly beans in a jar. We just want them to go to the polls, right? We're not spending time on investing to make sure they're invested, they're emotionally attached and invest in the election. In order to do that, we've got to get them involved early. So I'm hoping that in this moment that we see that we should use starting now, not waiting until next year, that we should be engaging and evangelizing people around the election and our power, and really pushing that not out of the space of fear, but possibility, so that they are so emotionally engaged in the election cycle that when they try to steal it, that people are going to be upset and people are going to organize and push back.
Yes. And I want to pick up on this idea of possibilities, and bring you and I, Jen, to, you're always so good at talking about like the vision of where we're going. The other side had Project 2025, like what's the strategizing for 2029? If we can win a trifecta, what's the world that we're trying to create and the state of that?
I think this point is so important. Without being able to articulate a clear vision for how things can and should be different in Earth 3, it's going to be so hard to build the kind of relationship to elections and to democracy that we need to build with people in this country. And so there has been a lot of conversation about how do we create a fulsome vision for Earth 3 that feels worth fighting for, feels worth facing down the specter of cruelty to fight for our families and for future generations. And so there are people talking about an economic agenda. The piece of that I'm working on has to do with care, with caregiving, and I can say a little bit more about that. And then there are people working on a democracy reform agenda for the next era. And then I'm sure groups of people are now starting to come together. I think that marrying the visioning with the organizing is really, really important, because we need people to feel ownership over the future that they're going to be called upon to vote for and organize and fight for. And so the way we're approaching that, as an example, is the care ecosystem of groups. So it's the Care Can't Wait Coalition and beyond. And so it's groups that care about childcare, groups that have been fighting for paid leave in states and cities, and nationally, groups that care about direct care for older adults, people with disabilities, and the care workforce, right? That whole ecosystem of organizations that has really grown since COVID. Our plan is next year to have 1 million conversations with caregiving families in the working class and middle class across the country. There are 130 million people today in America who either provide or rely upon care in some form or fashion. It's a very powerful, untapped force for change, maybe the most powerful in history, multiracial. And the bulk of that population is people who earn just enough not to be eligible for any means-tested program in our country, and not enough to pay out of pocket for care. 60% of American workers earn less than $60,000 per year. The average cost of childcare is $11,000 per year per kid. The average cost of a room in an assisted living facility is $100,000 a year. The numbers the math doesn't math for the vast majority of people. So when we look at the 90 million people who didn't vote in 2024, a lot of those people are right in that zone. They are on the front lines of the affordability crisis in our country. We need to be speaking directly to them, and actually probably mostly listening, like 80% listening. And so that's what we plan to do, is to have 1 million conversations that are 80% listening to caregiving families in that zone. Not to the exclusion of very poor and low income families, but in addition to, but making sure that that unseen working class, middle class part of our electorate is seen by us and feels that we care about them, right? The specter of cruelty that Doran talked about, the antidote to that is a spectacle of caring and showing up, embodying that we actually care. that we are actually fighting because we care. And if we invite you into being a part of winning the next gen care solution, it's because we care, because we give a shit about your families. And so a million of those conversations and largely listening in order to, in early of 2027, launch a next generation of a vision for universal care in our country that helps people afford the care they need to take care of themselves and their loved ones, to be a kind of centerpiece of an economic agenda that is about getting to the heart of the affordability crisis. The fact that everything is so much more expensive. Every basic need working class families have is more expensive, and wages actually are either stagnant or declining in this environment. And so yeah, that's the plan on care. And I'll say that there are kind of parallel visioning processes happening in other sectors. And the more those visioning processes are combined with actual engagement on the ground locally with people in community, I think the more impactful it will be.
There's one part of that. I just want to jump in and say that there's another epidemic that is happening that really is an opportunity for us. And I do believe, in terms of, I agree totally. I think we should lead with the care economy. I actually believe that's the antidote. But people are lonely. There are all kinds of reports coming out that folks are lonely, that young people, lonely, I was trying to be in the streets when I was in my mid 20s, right? But they're saying that people are lonely. And so the grassroots engagement, a million conversations for people who are feeling isolated and lonely and fear, there is an opportunity for us, if we just if we just take this moment and just be tactical for a short-term win, we're going to lose in the end. I'm just telling y'all, we're just going to lose, right? Because we're losing people. People need a sense of belonging. People need a sense of safety. We have been talking about, Ajahn and I, and even Billy, we've been talking about this need for love. Like, at the end of the day, what people are seeing, leadership of dominance. And it seems like, but at some point, none of us really like that. Even those of us that may have a strong family member, at the end of the day, it's only so much you can admire around that. And so I just say that because there's a real opportunity and opening on how we are transforming this moment. That's not just about policy, but it really is centered around people. And how do we create an agenda going into this next year, which is the 250th anniversary, to say that we are moving forward in a way that's not just about a political win, but we're going to win the hearts and the minds and imaginations of people by giving them a sense of hope and a sense of belonging.
I'll just add a couple things, and then I don't know if we're going to open it up, but amen. Like loneliness and sort of the antidote is care to the spectacles of cruelty. I just want to, it's on brand for me to double down on the conversation about organizing. So I'll close with a couple of thoughts about that. So Hari Han, if some of you have ever listened to her, she's a new MacArthur genius, but I knew her before she was a genius. So she uses this phrase that America has a drought of supply for the kinds of experiences that Natasha and myself and Ajahn are talking about. So what I mean by the supply, it's like, what is the place or space that somebody would go in which they're the phrase that I sometimes use to try to describe is they're in a human scaled experience of agency and belonging. So that experience could happen online, but it can also happen in real life, but it's not, but it usually has to involve like constructed relationships. So me being a singular individual on a list or a person on the van who got door knocked is not building the supply. that, and the metrics, going back to Latasha's metrics conversation, are usually about how many of those individualized experiences get created by our movement. So it's like how many doors got knocked, how many texts got sent, who got a click to call on a list. And those things are not bad. They're good things. But it's not, I built a team in my neighborhood and I found a way through that team to be a part of something bigger than myself. Like there was scaffolding where I feel like my action matters, but I'm with 10, 20, 30 other people where we connect, we belong, we're embodying some way that we care for each other and we care for the world around us. And the only way to have that supply is some form of organizing or organization. So we have to strengthen, we have to create whole more new kinds of infrastructure in which people have that experience. And secondly, we have to strengthen the places where people are having that, some version of that experience. And we need to push ourselves in our sector, whether it's Black Voters Matter or it's a local organization in Alabama or it's in Arizona, to say, how are we taking responsibility as organizers for dramatically scaling the supply of experiences that people can have that give me a sense of power and a sense of agency. So the last quote would be that I'm also influenced by a bunch of other people, but this is kind of a provocative statement. Going on this list and individual experience thing, we have an abundance of opportunity for participation. So participation might look like I go to a protest or I voted. But the challenge that we have is that we don't have enough places where that participation gets channeled into experience of power. And if I don't have any power, but I voted 3, 4, 5 times. Why? But my affordability crisis didn't change. And my care didn't get cheaper. And I'm still getting, I still don't have rights that I deserve. Why would I participate again? And the thing that organizing does, whether it's a labor union or it's a community organization or it's a national organization that has local expressions, right? Because you can structure this any number of ways. If we don't build more of that infrastructure that can channel people's experience, like channel people's participation into power, we are not going to get to Earth 3. So that's just like, and all of us and lots of people that we're like connected to around the country are really wrestling with how do we build the resistance and the response to Earth 2, but do it in a way that is dramatically expanding the supply of people's experience of agency and power.
I love this. Oh, we should have made this 2 hours. Okay, we're just gonna do closing thoughts, which you can take any of those questions there. What are some promising things you want to leave people with? Visions of success, and then also just tell us how folks can donate to your efforts, and we'll put in the chat the details. Ijin, do you want to kick us off? And literally 2 minutes each because we have to end on time, and then we're gonna have half an hour to talk.
Great. I thought that the We Ain't Buying It campaign was a great model for really helping us build this muscle around economic campaigning and utilizing our economic power building muscle. I think most of our ecosystem has a default towards political power, but we have a lot of power as consumers, as workers in this economy, and we should really use and deploy that power. So I love what Latasha has led us towards, and I think we got to do more of that and weave that campaigning into our political work in 2026. And you can support Karen Action at karenaction.us. And the Million Conversations work is actually work that we're welcoming everyone into. So if you want to host some conversations, or you have a company that you think reaches a lot of caregivers that might want to be a partner with us, or you know some people in the Lions Club who could host a conversation with it, like we want partners. So please let me know, and love to work with you.
Thank you, Aiden. Latasha, you want to go next?
So I'll say quickly, ditto to what Ajahn said just quickly. I think people are paying attention now. We don't have, we're seeing all the bad things, but the truth of the matter is we have a real unique opportunity. People are paying attention in ways that they've not paid attention in decades. And so, since we have their attention, what is it that we're going to say? I think there's a real opportunity that it just aligns up next year as the 250th anniversary of this country. I think that's an enormous opening for us to reframe the America for the next 250 around that we want to see. And I think we need to lean into that. I think we need to lean into people's imaginations of what are the possibilities of taking, what does an Earth 3 look like, right? I don't even think we've even had conversations around that. I usually ask the question everywhere I go. My first question is always, what would America look like without racism? And 99.9% of the people have never been asked that question. And if we've not been asked that question, that means that we are not thinking about an America post-racial America as if it's not possible. And so my point is, I think it's important for us to really utilize this opening of opportunity to really be able to push people to think past the pain, to think past the White House, and what is the next thing. And I think next year is a great opportunity for us to do that. You can support our work on Black Voters Matter Fund.org. The people won't leave us alone. We ain't buying it. We just got, it was a warning shot. We will continue to build on that, but you can also find out more information at We Ain't Buying It, or follow us on Black Voters Matter.
Doran?
So my final call to action to MVP, and this is not just to flatter you, it's that I think the most important thing that you could do to support the work that I'm doing is two things. Whether it's MVP or something else, put money through MVP that gets into the hands of local organizers. But secondly, because you guys are donors yourselves, but you also have some power and some influence with a lot of people in the kind of political donor world, how you think very carefully about the incentive structures and what you're inviting from local organizers, so that what we don't do in this incredibly important moment in 2026 is try to turn every organizer and person in the country into like a door knocker for 1,000 years. So not that people shouldn't do door knocking, don't get me wrong. But it's about, is this an Earth One orientation about the election, or is it do we understand that we're inviting people to take risks on a whole other level about how they're engaging people, how they're building scale, how they're engaged in resistance, how they're focused on the economy, how they're like using every lever they have in their local context to like throw a punch in a good way at this, like in this, against what it is that we're facing, and are having conversations with their constituents and their relationships about like what we want, what care would look like, what America would look like in the future. That's how people should do politics in 2026. And MVP has a really important role in inviting that kind of imagination from local partners in 2020.
I agree.
God, I wish we had 10 times as many people on this call. This call will be recorded, so please share it. And I'll just close with saying, how can you get involved and support these? We want to encourage people to support Care in Action, Black Voters Matter Fund, State Power Action Fund. We can also make connections. And how do you, what now? Give big, give early, give monthly, organize your networks. Really, I can't emphasize enough that giving early to our amazing partners and or through MVP makes the world of difference in leaders being able to actually lead instead of like look for crumbs and try to figure out, how to survive. So we encourage you to support our incredible partners and or to work through MVP, work with our amazing state advisors, our amazing donor advisors and philanthropic advisors, our amazing volunteer teams that many of you are in relationship with, organize house parties. Get involved, be part of this. We want you, we need you. We thank you so much for everything that you've done. And, just the theme I felt like going throughout all of this is we need to build a real movement together with all our everyone to like change this country, and we can do it. And we're so lucky to have such brilliant leadership from Ijin, Latasha, and Doran, and just to be in partnership with you all. And just the way oh yeah, and it's our 10-year anniversary, and we're closing the call now. We didn't have time to celebrate this year. We'll celebrate more next year and talk about how we go to the next level. So with that, we're going to officially close the call, and Zoe is going to kick off the Q&A, and our speakers are mostly have to leave, but if you're able to stay, you're welcome to participate in the Q&A. And thank you just from all of us. All the love that was given to MVP is really just collectively, not only the staff team, but the volunteer team and all of the donors who have made MVP, who've gotten us from a scrappy startup and an idea to an institution. And we just take really seriously being great partners with all of you. So go team. Thanks, everyone. And Zoe, do you want to queue up the Q&A?
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you all so much. If you need to head out, now's a good time. And we are officially opening up MVP office hours. You can put the slide back on. I'll just do a little housekeeping at the start here. So yeah, ask any burning questions you have about anything you heard on the call, anything about MVP's broader strategy looking forward. You can raise your hand to share off mute or share in the chat. Try to be concise so we can get to as many folks as we can. And if you have a speech or a PSA or a shameless plug, use the chat. It would be great. So I'm going to kick us off with we've got a few questions actually in the Q&A box. And then Charlie, I see your hand raised, so I'm going to take you after a question in the chat. So the first question is working with faith leaders in 2026 about mobilizing a moral consensus against the administration's cruelty spectacle. This was, a question about how do we combine the moral organizing with the electoral organizing. And Latasha, I see you smiling and beaming over there. I see you're still here. So maybe you want to just take this first.
There's one, I love that question so much because I think that's the question. For me, that's the question, right? What's interesting is one of the areas that I don't think that we leverage or we use enough is on the progressive side, we move away from faith. When we know that 70% of America is identified with faith, it is the driver. It's a different kind of driver on the other side, but it is a driver. And so part of what I had talked to Billy about is this concept of in the scriptures. I grew up in the Christian faith tradition. And so my grandmother used to use this all the time, but in the scriptures, there's instruction on what do you do with fear? Like when fear happens, like how do you address fear? And the scripture says, this verse says, perfect love drives out all fear. Perfect love drives out all fear. Now that might not mean anything if that's not a framing, but if you look at what is aligned in all of the faith traditions, is there is all of them have a universal brotherhood, and there is this concept of love. Whether you call it God, whether you call it a higher power, whether you call it love, whatever, it doesn't matter. But ultimately, there's some power that says you're worthy, that you're affirming, that you deserve more. That's a really, really powerful position, whether you're a person of faith or a person who chooses not to practice a faith. But the idea that you are worthy and you are valued, and that you and because of that, that in itself affirms who you are, not what you do, but just by the nature of your very existence, that there's something really powerful that I think we should lean into. And I believe that we need to start looking at, and I think that there are some examples of that around liberation theology, that there are some people who've used this vehicle around liberation theology to really be able to think about and move and organize from their faith perspective. But I think that there's a larger piece around universal brotherhood and sisterhood and love. Like, I want to do a perfect love movement. Like, how do we build a perfect love movement that we are really framing? What does it mean? What does perfect love mean? Perfect love doesn't mean perfection in the context of the world, like you don't do anything wrong. In perfect love, I give myself the grace and I give you the grace to mess up, right? But there's always redemption available. What if our society really created a space where people could be redeemed? What if we created a space where really forgiveness? What if we created a space that we saw power, not in the necessarily as dominance, but power was equated to how you share and you advance the lives of others? And so I think part of there has to be a narrative frame, but I also think that there's a values proposition that can come outside of the faith tradition, that we should really be lifting up where we are, that goes beyond the teaching of individualism, that individually is about your individual soul, but there's a part around the faith tradition that really is around collective advancement. I think we should be leaning into in this moment.
Yeah, and if you look at any successful movement, like starting with the civil rights movement, faith is at the center of it. And it's one of my favorite phrases, I don't even know where it came from as a secular Jewish person, is fear God, not man. It's like, but we're not here to fear like Trump and his bullies. Like,
No.
we're answerable to a higher power. We're answerable to a higher calling. We're put here for like greater purposes. And that is what we're accountable to. That is what we are here to do, which is exactly what Latasha said, to be in relationship, in a relationship based on love with one another, and that's it goes back to what Ijen and Doran were saying too. It's like the I love this care thing that Ijen has built. It's like, it's so powerful because it works on the level of care workers and people who are being cared for. Like, she gets together the care workers and the people who are getting, like, which a lot of time the care workers are women of color, and a lot of the people who are being cared for are older white people, right? And they're part of the same, they have some of the same interests to have, anyway, and like weaving the care and the love through the way that we do all of our work. These people who you wouldn't immediately assume like have something in common or on the same page. It's like that has to be the heart of what we're doing, is weaving those connections of care and love. And I think there's a lot of really interesting path-breaking work happening on this right now. I'll pass it.
Ooh, great. Yeah. And I'll just add, we don't have time to get into all the names, but I'm just going to toot MVP's horn that we're proud to fund a lot of faith-based organizing groups all over the country at the national, state, and the local level in every state that we can. So with that, let's go to Charlie. If you can come off mute, we'd love to hear your question. And then after that, we're going to take another question from the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I would be very interested in working with iGen and others around the care community, which is really a huge part of the electorate, and those who are underpaid and really rely upon federal and state support represent 8% of the workforce and the voting population. And my experience has been they simply don't know about the care agenda that has been put forward by Democrats, by Harris, by Biden, that was on the agenda that almost got enacted on a permanent basis. And there are many people who are politically active as volunteers who are tied up with those and connected with those, some because they're caregivers themselves, others because they're mentors to or supervisors of them, or they're people who know that. And they frankly are never asked to do what they can do best, which is talk with those folks who are in that care community and engage with them because they already have their trust. And I think that that's a real avenue that's been overlooked in campaigning. We've done work in Iowa to try to do that through an Iowa Helpers community and others. But I really would encourage, a focused emphasis and really looking at the people who know those in the care community and care about them and are respected in their communities because they do so. We've got to find a way of not just asking them for money or for time to do cold calls, but do what they have the superpowers to do, which
I
is connect up with those who are in the caregiving community and give them support and information about what it really means for them to have a society that would support their work wholeheartedly.
I love this.
Amen.
And you're in Iowa, is that right?
Yes.
Where in Iowa are you?
Well, I'm in Ames, but I'm a former state legislator, and I ran a child and family policy center for 25 years, and I'm active in trying to put together a grassroots, and we really have a grassroots Iowa network which does this. But I also worked with an Iowa helping community of about 70 people during the Biden first election around specifically these issues.
I love this. So Charlie has just modeled what we're hoping for from everyone on this call. You started out by saying, I want to help and be involved in. And so just want to reflect, to everyone on this call who is looking for something more to be involved in a deeper way in the spirit of everything we talked about on this call. That is what we're dreaming of, for everyone in your own way to get involved. If we can help, if you can, if you want to go through the MVP volunteer thing, every group is trying to develop its volunteer capacity because there's so many talented, brilliant people, many of whom are baby boomers who want to save their grandchildren's future, and who have a lifetime of skills and talent, treasure, and networks and social capital to bring. And one of the things we're trying to figure out is how do we create more on-ramps to bring more people into community. I was just got to have a wonderful dinner with the MVP volunteer team in Western Mass. And they're like such amazing people, so brilliant, wanting to get involved, and they've built this community that is so good that now people are wanting to get involved with them. That's what we need to build all over the country. Anyway, we can go to the next.
Yeah, so speaking of building all over the country, I'm going to take a question from the Q&A. It's actually two questions that get at the same thing. Latasha, if you're able to stay, would love your thoughts. Billy, others. This is about the Democratic Party. We kind of skirted around it during the briefing, but question is, what do we take to get the Democratic Party establishment to participate in this vision that we're talking about? And what do we do about so many people who are disenchanted with the party?
Oh my
So
gosh.
just a small question, Billy, what you got?
I can start in this, others can add, and Latasha, love your thoughts on this. So it's so funny because we've always said, people are like, the Democratic Party, this, the candidates that. We're like, that's not our lane. We're focused on organizing in groups and that impacts the Democratic Party in all sorts of ways. I mean, Doran and her work in Minnesota, they basically have shaped the Democratic Party agenda and transform the Democratic Party agenda in Minnesota. Ijen, similarly, where did that whole care thing come from that the Democrats embraced? Ijen and her care crew made that an issue that they picked up and partner closely with them. So um, MVP is starting a new thing next year that you know we put one of our goals is to embolden Democrats, and there are lots of ways that the groups that we fund embolden Democrats, from recruiting candidates to working with them to be more bold. There's a whole list of ways that the partners we're working with, shape Democrats and the Democratic Party in helpful ways. In addition to that, we're on the cusp of hiring a consultant. This is totally inside baseball, who is working on a project that's basically like, how do we fix and improve the Democratic Party? And is going to be interviewing a lot of people, both insiders and outsiders, about what do we do about the Democratic Party. It's something we've never tried to take on before in this way, but it feels like there's this leadership gap where nobody feels like the Democratic Party's theirs. People are like, the Democratic Party, aka they, and everyone has complaints about it. And it's like, guess what, guys? We gotta do a barn raising here to address this thing ourselves. We gotta all be involved in this. And so this is a new area of work that MVP is just exploring right now, and you'll hear more about next year. Latasha, how do you think about that?
So let me say this. I think we keep, it's interesting. I want us to step back for a second. When you are playing when you're playing a basketball game against another team and the team beats you, in your mind, they got it all together, right? Like there's like, that team was amazing, right? You might be able to come back and beat that team by 50 points, right? It may have been a whole set of circumstances. The reason why I'm saying that is it's not just the Democratic Party. The party apparatus, as we know it, has shifted. There is no Republican Party, y'all. There is MAGA. They have taken over the Republican Party. They're scared to speak and hold their own leadership accountable. So they're not better at messaging. They're not, we keep creating this kind of thing like, oh, they got it all together. No, they don't. They got one simple message. They do have a message. A message is around white nationalism, right? Those who would speak against it are afraid to speak against it. And so, and I'm saying that because I think we're dealing with the party question like we're in Earth 1, when in fact we're trying to get to Earth 3. Earth 1 does not exist anymore. Traditional political parties do not exist, neither the Republican or the Democrat, particularly on the federal level. So it's not like the Republicans got it all together and we need to copy them, because that's not it, right? The second thing, I'm saying that because I think we have to really. And part of the reason why the parties have collapsed is because they were resistant to change. The Republicans were resistant to change. They were inside baseballers. And let's be honest, the Democrats were corporatists. So they were also inside baseballers as well. They scoffed at the Tea Party when the Tea Party started, and it seemed like it was a fringe group. The Tea Party laid the foundation, right, for this new party apparatus that's happening. I'm raising that because I think it's important for us to really be realistic around what does a party look like going into Earth 3, right? But being in Earth 2. And so there are two lessons that I can share just quickly. And it's coming up soon. In Alabama is a 75% Republican state. Solid. You can't do anything. It's just really, really challenging, right? Where most people thought that you can't do anything, you don't need to invest in it. I will tell you what MVP, because I am still on my MVP commercial ability regardless, because I must keep pumping you up, right? What MVP did, MVP came in and gave us, we asked, and Billy raised almost $300,000. We were able to take around $300,000 and strategically invest in the Black Belt. Well, nobody was actually doing any work in the Black Belt other than local groups to help them build their capacity because we saw an opportunity. You had a weak Republican candidate, but you had a Democratic candidate that had a horrible commercial. He's such a good guy, but he had a horrible commercial. He had a commercial with he still believed that you had to go white and right, but he also believed that, but he's really a good guy. I really like Doug Jones. He's running for governor, so I just want to lift that up. But his campaign didn't have the messaging. He had a commercial on TV that had a Confederate general and a Union general coming out meeting at the same space and saying, "This is the kind of leader I want to be." Now, because they were able to make compromise. Y'all do remember what the compromise was about, right? And who it was about. I'm just saying. So when I say tone deaf, like I don't know how I'm gonna get Black people to vote for you on that, but I will say in the space, what we had to do is we had to shift from centering the party, and we had to shift our message to this day to getting people to be centered. So we actually had commercials that say it's not about the Republicans, it's not about the Democrats, it's all about you. And so we have a theme right now that we've used and been really successful to get people to see ownership and see part of themselves. And so even in Georgia, we did the same thing. We had to really shift. You have to get beyond the idea of just as partisan, what party wins. You've got to make it be the people win, right? And these are the people happen to be in this party, right, that are more in alignment. The other thing is there's going to have to be some change. There's going to have to be some casualty of war. Now, I know people might have whole different kind of positions around this, but we cannot go into next year with the same kind of Democratic Party leadership and think that people are going to think that something has changed. If we're not willing to do something around changing, right, if we don't see a change in the Senate or the House, there's going to have to be some kind of fundamental shift that says this is a new party and we understand and respect the wishes of the people and move away from some of those. There was a lot of criticism. What's the young guy down who did the work down in Florida that people got mad at? David Hall, that's his name, David Hall, that people got mad. He's young, was not skilled. His messaging wasn't correct. Right? Well, his messaging didn't work well. Let me not say it's not correct or whatever, right? But the truth of the matter is, if we were really got beyond our feelings and heard what he was saying, his instinct was right. What he was saying is that there are people who are not being able to come into the process, right? While his strategy may have been off, his messaging was that in order for this party to survive, there has to be a space that is not just based on seniority, or you're going to lose the people because it's the same old, same old. That's what it was felt. And so there's a value in seniority in those spaces, but we can't continue with the same model, believing that people just going to fall in line with that model. So there's something different that has to happen that shows that the actual character of the party is allowing itself to be reshaped, and that there has to be some example of that where there's some reshaping of that we don't get so fearful that we hold on to the good golden days, because there were no good golden days. They're gone. The days that we're familiar with, that they're gone. And so I think that there's a space for us to really think about the party, how we change the party, but the larger question is not how we change the party. The larger question is how do we organize people that can help shape the party? That's the most important question.
Yes. I see Lori. Lori, one of our newest volunteer leaders in Western Mass, who I just got to meet on Friday.
Yeah, thank you, Billy. I mainly want to second this emphasis on weaving in the vision in the reasons why we are gathered here together and what we gain by being here together. At that meeting, we were discussing that Billy just referred to. We were discussing the relation between the message that we're ultimately fundraisers for activist groups who are benefiting us all, and first of all benefiting the communities they're working in, and this larger vision of Earth 3. Some of us were making the case that when we refer to ourselves as a mutual fund mainly, I mean, I like the word mutual in it. That hints of it. But how do we think about our language of ourselves and as we speak to others, to get at the mutual care part that our three speakers were talking about so beautifully. I was crying. It was so beautiful. And I think that because we're all working so hard to bring in money, we can sometimes not lose sight, but over prioritize and not always speak together of the mutual fund and the mutual care. And I think of events like this one, these have been crucial to me. This is why I'm a volunteer. I keep getting a political education, a moral education. And I go to meetings and we might be doing all kinds of technical decision making, but we're doing it together. I've met a whole group of new people. I just retired. I keep telling myself, I've met a whole new group of people. And isn't this what it's about? That we, infect people, wrong word, but inspire, I guess, with this amazing love that we are doing, all of us, all the activist organizations, when we do this work. So if our vision is this transformation, let's appreciate that we are being transformed right now in this very minute. And just one last thing, my own quiet little corner call out to MVP, which I keep encouraging to appreciate the legacy of what you've built. You've built a fabric. It's not just that we haven't gotten far enough. Impress everyone with the organization and the care that 10 years have put together. It didn't exist 10 years ago. So go. And thank you.
Thank you, Lori. And speaking of inspiring the masses, that's a perfect segue. Before we close out on the half hour, I'm going to turn it to my colleague, Alicia Guerreri, to talk about how to get involved with MVP if you're called to do that. So we'll just take 2 minutes on that, and then we'll close out officially.
Thank you, Zoe, and everyone. So glad that you're here. You stayed even long, 26 minutes past the hour, and Lori for that incredible setup to talk about the volunteer program. My name is Alicia Guerreri. I'm a donor organizing manager with MVP. And, we know that building power means organized people and organized information, and it also means organized resources, which is why MVP has a volunteer program of donor organizers dedicated to building the movement of donors to help fund the progressive era that we believe in. So donating and organizing your network is activism. As Lori was talking about her work, I think you probably saw a bunch of people chiming into the chat. So I'm going to turn it over to one of our volunteers to share what it is like to be part of our volunteer community and how to get involved. So Emily, if you want to come off mute.
Hello.
Thanks, Emily.
Can you hear me? I'm Emily Harris. I am a new member of the new National Donor Network team. And where Lori and some people in the chat have talked about geographically based hubs, we are a group of volunteers from around the country. I live in Chicago, and although we have a number of donors from Chicago, we don't have a hub here. And so we've been meeting to try to figure out how we can activate volunteers from all over the country to do things like host house parties, participate as Zoom facilitators, make presentations for other people's house parties, coordinate volunteers, and find a way, even though we're not connected geographically, to be an activist home for people. I did this because I canvassed a lot during the last election, and it always felt a little empty to go up to Wisconsin and knock on doors of people who weren't in my community, knowing that the difference was going to be made by those MVP type organizers. So I wanted to find a way to give not only my money, but my time. And I hope you'll join us. And the volunteer intake form is in the chat.
Yay, Emily.
Thank you so much, Emily. And thank you all for joining. I'm going to pass it back to Billy to close us out officially.
Well, I was just so happy to see Emily on there. Like this is my dream, y'all. Like, is that people like Emily raise their hands in all over the country and they're like, hey, we don't have a hub here, but I get it. I want to be involved. And then there's another person and another, and we're like, oh, there's four people in Chicago. Let's get you guys together, and eventually there'll be a hub, and eventually there will be hubs everywhere because that's what we need. We need that is how we build and weave this community across geography, across race, across generation, across everything is just people raising their hands and being like, let's I want to be part of this. Let's do this. And so we invite you to be part of this with us. And Emily, just in the way you just modeled it, and to join our volunteer team. And it was so fun being at this Western Mass event because there were a bunch of people who'd been there for like 5 or 6 years, and then there were some new people who'd just come, and the people who'd been there had like created such a wonderful space that people then wanted to join it. That's what we have to do everywhere. And so I want to just deeply thank everyone who's been part of building all this. You know, um, MVP has gotten so much love on this call, and when you think MVP, please don't think, oh, that's an organization. Think like that is something that I feel connected to, that I'm a part of, that I is a channel that I use to move money and is a community that I can be part of and is any way I want to be. So, so welcome everyone if you're new. And if you've been around and you're not quite ready to raise your hand like Emily did, we hope you'll just consider yourselves part of this community we're building because what we're really trying to do is build and support movement everywhere at every level that we can all be part of. And eventually we'll have lawn signs and people will be like, I'm part of a movement. You know, it's this imaginary thing that we get to invent together to change the whole country. So thank you everyone for being part of this. And I just see so many names and faces of people who've done so much to build this. So happy 10-year anniversary. And we'll do more celebrating next year. And go team. Let's change this country in all the ways. And thank you, Latasha, if you're still here. Thank you, Doran. Thank you, Ijen, and thank you everyone who has been holding hands together to make this incredible movement happen. Go team. Thanks, Zoe. And you too, Zoe.
Oh, and you too, Billy. Thank you all so much. We'll see y'all soon.
All right.